a war that ends an age. And a palm leaf inked in eastern India over 600 years ago says one power from the far north steps in, not to conquer, but to shelter. It writes the word down. It calls it Russia. Now, when we usually look at ancient texts, we're accustomed to these vague metaphors, right? The kind of flexible words that can be molded to fit pretty much any era. But what we're examining in today's explainer defies that expectation entirely. We're looking at a physical artifact of history that speaks with this unnerving, hyper-specific clarity about a massive geopolitical shift. So this immediately hits us with some really profound mysteries. How does a 16th century manuscript name a modern nation? What does it say that nation does when the global order fractures? And, perhaps most pressingly for us right now, why does one specific verifiable line point directly to the year 2027? We're going to decode the evidence piece by piece today, mapping this out onto our modern timeline. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our investigative menu for this explainer. Section 1, the palm leaf prophecies. 2, the northern king. 3, the secret search. 4, the shelter. 5, the date. And finally, 6, the true protection. Let's start with Section 1, the palm leaf prophecies. Before we can get into the geopolitical side of things, we absolutely must establish a firm, zero-knowledge baseline of what it is we're actually looking at. The source material here is known as the Bhavishya Malika, which translates to the Garland of the Future. It's an incredibly vast collection of 100 future-predicting texts. And listen, these aren't just oral traditions passed down through whispers. They are physical, enduring artifacts originally inscribed on specially treated palm leaves. In eastern India, these are traditionally known as talapatra. They're fragile, sure, but remarkably enduring documents that have waited silently for hundreds of years. So, who wrote them? These specific texts were authored 6 centuries ago by a revered group known as the Panchasakha. These are the 5 great saints of Odisha. And I want to be really clear here. In our investigation, we will always refer to them as great saints or great men. Now, as we get ready to read the actual verses, I have to state 2 absolutely critical caveats. These are our guardrails to keep this investigation strictly objective and apolitical. First, when the text mentions a country or a ruler, we are naming an age and a role, not any present-day government or living leader. We name no one. Zero politics here. Second, the text frequently warns against the rise of the lecha. Please understand that this word describes a category of adharma, or unrighteous, destructive conduct. It defines a tyrant by a way of acting. It is absolutely not a person of any specific modern nation, ethnicity, or religion. Moving right along to Section 2, the Northern King. Let's look directly at the primary source evidence. According to the Bhavishya Malika, in the specific text known as the Padmakapa Tika, authored by the great Saint Achitananda Das, the geopolitical landscape of the future is explicitly laid out. The verse reads exactly like this: Rushya and Rupati Bada Pratapi Rajana, Kamante Beta Heva Prabhu Sanindanan. This isn't some vague approximation. It translates directly. Russia's mighty ruler will come for the Lord's darshan. The text states exactly who emerges from the north. Now, what's really interesting about this is the profound contrast it highlights. It completely flips our core assumptions about global power on its head. When we study history, we're conditioned to expect stories of territorial expansion, right? Fire, conquest, shifting borders. But the ancient text explicitly subverts this. It describes this mighty ruler from the north seeking a darshan, which is a spiritual audience. They're seeking the Lord directly, arriving for a spiritual connection, not endless war. That brings us to Section 3, the secret search. The great Saint Achutananda Das does not describe this arrival as a single sudden event. It's not an overnight invasion. It's a highly deliberative process. If we examine these original Odia verses, specifically on page 80 of the Padmakapa Tika, the text states clearly that Russia's ruler secretly searches across Bengal and Odisha. It implies this calculated, ongoing process of seeking, investigating, and unfolding realization that eventually culminates in a deep spiritual alignment. And they don't just leave this process floating in some unknown future. They baked in mathematically testable timelines. A meticulous source to code within these very verses points to this active, secret search converging on a highly specific date, the year 2027. This framing is huge for us. The ancient authors didn't just present a vague doom-mongering threat, they presented a testable, falsifiable prediction for this decade. Which leads us to Section 4, the shelter. So what actually happens when the global upheaval finally strikes? For this, we look at another foundational text. In the Kali Yuga Gita, Achyutananda Das, chapter 3, we find this extraordinary statement. India's ruling family will take shelter with Russia for some days during the upheaval. Think about that for a second. What an incredible geopolitical assertion for a 16th century saint to make. And it's not an isolated mention either. The Kali Kalpa Gita, in its 3rd chapter, completely corroborates it. As the timeline builds, the source material outlines a pretty terrifying period of intense chaos. The texts explicitly describe a massive, multi-front war involving China, Pakistan, and others, right alongside catastrophic natural disasters. But in the midst of all that global fracturing, Russia is prophesied to step in, providing both physical and spiritual shelter. The text is so specific here. It notes the quiet, deliberate building of vital water infrastructure, bridges, reservoirs designed to guard against a coming famine. It literally reframes water from being a violently contested resource of modern war into a mechanism of physical refuge. Section 5. The date. For the logical minds watching, the most demanding question is obviously about timing. How do we know this timeline is active right now? Well, the authors of the Malika use the ultimate, unalterable timepiece, the sky itself. They tied the turning of this entire age to a specific astronomical trigger they call Mina Shani. As you can read here, it states the irrefutable evidence of this upheaval is tied exactly to the moment the slow-moving planet Saturn, which is Shani, crosses into the zodiac sign of Pisces, which is Mina. Now, the crucial discipline here is separating what a telescope independently confirms from what the text predicts. Saturn physically entered Pisces on March 29, 2025. That's not a prophecy. That is a mathematically verifiable astronomical fact. The celestial clock set 6 centuries ago genuinely rang on that exact date. From that verifiable anchor point, the text adds its prediction, a massive cascading global upheaval converging on the year 2027. But, and this is so important, it doesn't end in permanent darkness. The text confidently points to the year 2032 as the dawn of an entirely new age, the Satya Yuga. Let's make sure our baseline is totally complete by defining what that hopeful headline actually means. The Satya Yuga is the ultimate era of truth, profound peace, and universal brotherhood. The texts state it's ushered in by Kalki, the divine manifestation, and the Malika specifies, without any ambiguity whatsoever, that Kalki is born only in Sambhal, ruling out any other geographic claims. This is the ultimate positive reset. The destruction isn't the end of the story. It's simply the fierce transition required to clear the ground for 2032. And finally, Section 6, the true protection. We've talked about massive movements of nations and planets, but how does an ordinary individual actually survive this? According to the teachings of Pundit Dr. Sri Kashinath Mishra, the real protection is entirely internal. It's a zero-cost spiritual defense mechanism called Trisandhya. That means dedicated worship at the 3 twilights, the 3 crucial junctions of the day. First, in the morning, the Brahma Muhura, just as the night departs. Second, at midday. And third, in the evening, the Goduli, right as the sun sets. The true beauty of this, it requires absolutely no money, no physical temple, and no intermediary. Alongside faithfully practicing Trisandhya, the absolute most powerful protection is simply chanting the divine name of Madhava. When you speak the name Madhava during these transitions of time, your call cuts right through the chaos. It's a literal anchor in the storm. We also warmly invite you to explore the profound wisdom of the Srimad Bhagavat, as reading it is considered deeply protective and spiritually nourishing for the coming Satya Yuga. You see, the deepest claim of the Bhavishya Malika was never really about geopolitics or foreign kings. The true message is much more intimate. It tells us that an age ends in the exact same way a person changes, first quietly, from the inside, and then all at once. What you choose to practice right now, in the quiet moments of your day, decides which side of the dawn you will stand on when the world resets. So, the only question left is, are you ready?